Imagine the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. October 21st, 1805. The salty air is thick with anticipation. Two of the most powerful navies on Earth are about to collide in a battle that will not only decide the fate of an empire, but will also redefine naval warfare for a century to come. This is the story of the Battle of Trafalgar. To truly understand Trafalgar, we have to rewind a bit. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France, was at the peak of his power. He had conquered most of Europe, but one stubborn island nation stood in his way: Great Britain. Protected by the English Channel and the formidable Royal Navy, Britain was Napoleon's ultimate obsession. His grand plan: to invade. But to do that, he first had to gain control of the seas, even if just for a few days. This task fell to his combined Franco-Spanish fleet, a massive force of 33 ships of the line, commanded by the French Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. Villeneuve was a competent sailor, but he was also a man haunted by past defeats and deeply intimidated by his British counterpart. He knew what he was up against, and frankly, he was terrified. His orders were to break the British blockade of Cadiz, Spain, sail to the West Indies, lure the British fleet away, then race back to the English Channel to support the invasion. It was a complex, high-stakes gamble, and who was the man standing in his way? None other than Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, Lord Nelson. By 1805, Nelson was more than just an admiral. He was a living legend, a national hero. He had lost an eye in Corsica and his right arm at Santa Cruz de Tenerife. But his strategic brilliance and sheer audacity were unmatched. His men didn't just respect him, they adored him. They called themselves the Band of Brothers. Nelson understood naval warfare was not just about ships and cannons. It was about the will to fight, the courage of the sailors and leading from the front. Nelson had been chasing Villeneuve across the Atlantic for months in a grueling cat-and-mouse game. After a long and fruitless pursuit to the Caribbean and back, Villeneuve's fleet was cornered in the Spanish port of Cadiz. Villeneuve knew his ships were in poor condition, and his crews were a mix of inexperienced Frenchmen and reluctant Spaniards, many of whom were suffering from sickness. He wanted to stay in the safety of the port, but Napoleon's patience was wearing thin. Accused of cowardice and facing imminent replacement, Villeneuve was goaded into making a fateful decision. He would sail out and face Nelson. On the morning of October 21st, the lookouts on Nelson's flagship HMS Victory spotted the enemy. The combined Franco-Spanish fleet was sailing in a long, traditional line of battle. Conventional naval tactics of the day dictated that the two opposing fleets would sail parallel to each other, blasting away until one side gave up. It was a war of attrition, slow and often indecisive, but Nelson was anything but conventional. He had a radical, almost crazy plan. He would divide his smaller fleet of 27 ships into two columns and sail directly toward the enemy line, perpendicularly. This was an incredibly risky maneuver. It meant his lead ships would be exposed to the full converging broadsides of multiple enemy vessels for several agonizing minutes before they could even fire back. They would have to cross the T, but in reverse, taking all the punishment. The goal was to smash through the enemy's line, break their formation into chaos, and then engage in a close-quarters, ship-to-ship melee where the superior gunnery and seamanship of the British crews would prove decisive. It was a plan built on speed, aggression, and an absolute trust in his captains and men. As the two British columns, one led by Nelson in the Victory, and the other by his second-in-command Cuthbert Collingwood in the Royal Sovereign, slowly bore down on the enemy line, the tension was unbearable. The sea was calm, the winds light, meaning the approach was tortuously slow. On the deck of the Victory, Nelson turned to his signal officer and uttered the words that would echo through history. "Mr. Pascoe, I wish to say to the fleet, England confides that every man will do his duty." Pascoe suggested a slight change for faster signaling, and so the immortal phrase was hoisted, "England expects that every man will do his duty." The cheer that went up from ship to ship was deafening. It was the ultimate morale boost before heading into the inferno. Collingwood's column was the first to hit the enemy line. His ship, the Royal Sovereign, outpaced the others and plunged alone into the enemy formation. Collingwood, munching on an apple, coolly remarked, "Now, gentlemen, let's do something today which the world may talk of hereafter. His ship was immediately swarmed, taking a brutal pounding from all sides, its masts and rigging shredded. Then came Nelson's turn. HMS Victory, leading the second column, aimed for the heart of the enemy line, straight for Villeneuve's flagship, the Bucentaure. For nearly 40 minutes, the Victory endured a storm of iron. Cannonballs ripped through its sails, splintered its masts and tore through the decks, leaving a trail of destruction and casualties. The ship's wheel was smashed, and the great ship had to be steered manually from the tiller below decks. Finally, agonizingly, the Victory broke through the line, passing just behind the Bucentaure. What happened next was one of the most devastating naval broadsides in history. The Victory unleashed its massive 68-pounder carronades, loaded with a combination of round shot and musket balls, raking the stern of the Bucentaure from end to end. The single blast is estimated to have killed or wounded 400 men and disabled 20 cannons on the French flagship, effectively taking it out of the fight in a single cataclysmic moment. The battle devolved into the chaotic, brutal brawl Nelson had wanted. British ships, having pierced the line, surrounded individual enemy vessels. The air was a black fog of gunpowder smoke, filled with the roar of cannons, the crack of splintering wood, the screams of the wounded and the shouts of orders. Sailors fought with cannons, muskets, pistols, cutlasses and pikes on decks slick with blood. This was where the Royal Navy's relentless training paid off. British gun crews could fire a broadside 3 times faster than their French or Spanish counterparts. It was this rate of fire that proved utterly decisive. Amidst the chaos, Nelson paced the quarterdeck of the Victory with his captain, Thomas Hardy. He was a conspicuous figure, wearing his full admiral's uniform, adorned with the very medals that made him a target. He had refused to cover them, believing his presence was vital for morale. Around 1:15 p.m., as the Victory was locked in a deadly duel with the French ship Redoutable, a French sharpshooter perched high in the rigging took aim. A musket ball struck Nelson in the left shoulder, traveled down through his chest and lodged in his spine. He fell to the deck. "They have done for me at last, Hardy," he gasped. "My backbone is shot through." He was carried below to the cockpit, the ship's makeshift hospital, a dim, crowded space filled with the groans of the dying. Even in his final agony, Nelson's mind remained on the battle. He listened to the cheers from the decks above as enemy ships surrendered, and he repeatedly asked for Captain Hardy. When Hardy finally came, Nelson, barely conscious, gave his final orders and made his dying wishes. He wanted to make sure the fleet was anchored to ride out the approaching storm, and urged Hardy to take care of Emma Hamilton, the love of his life. His last words were a poignant mix of duty and personal plea. "Thank God I have done my duty. Kiss me, Hardy." By late afternoon, the battle was over. It was a victory of staggering proportions. The British had not lost a single ship. The Franco-Spanish fleet, on the other hand, was annihilated. 22 of their ships were captured or destroyed. Napoleon's dream of invading England was shattered forever. British naval supremacy was secured for the next 100 years, paving the way for the growth of the British Empire. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Nelson, the architect of that victory, was dead. When news reached London, the nation was plunged into mourning, even amidst the celebration. The hero who had saved them was gone. The Battle of Trafalgar was more than just a naval engagement. It was a clash of wills, a testament to strategic genius, and a brutal display of human courage and sacrifice. It was the pinnacle of the age of sail, fought by men of iron in wooden ships. The echoes of its cannons shaped the course of the 19th century and cemented the legend of Horatio Nelson as one of history's greatest military commanders. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more epic tales from history, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let me know in the comments which historical battle you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.